Hey everybody, and welcome to this, the first video in a brand new series on A-level English language. Everything that I go through in this video series comes from Mr. Bruff's Guide to A-level English language, written by Lindsay Dyer and available at mrbruff.com and amazon.co.uk for just £4.99. An absolutely amazing guide. The things I go through in this video will be almost a sort of introduction to the subject, but the ebook contains everything you need to know. And what I love about this ebook is that it contains examples of exam answers and coursework answers, which I think is so important for students who sometimes understand the theory but then think, okay, what do I do with that theory? So what I want to do in these early videos is look at the assessment objectives. I think a lot of students misunderstand the importance of assessment objectives. They think that they're just for teachers, for marking the work. But actually, if you know the assessment objectives and when they're assessed and what they mean and how to do well in demonstrating your expertise in those objectives, it really will make all the difference. So in today's video, I just want to start looking at assessment objective 1 to apply appropriate methods of language analysis using associated terminology and coherent written expression. Now, what does this mean? Well, the first thing we can look at is this word methods. The way in which you analyse and understand a text will determine which terminology you believe is most relevant to the text, the question and the response. Now, you're not expected to use all the terminology you learn in your answer, but you are expected to understand it all in order to make informed linguistic choices. There's basically a lot of terminology to learn, and that takes us on to this next bit, terminology. Now, the exam boards provide guidance on the terminology they expect you to learn, and we're going to look at that in more detail in future videos, but the guidance is only scratching the surface of what the examiners and your teachers will want to use or want you to use in your analysis. So the guidance includes the following, and this is just an outline. We're going to go through these in a lot more detail, but we have Lexus, the vocabulary of English, including the changes over time, both socially and historically. Semantics, the analysis of word meanings, the relationship between words. Grammar, one you probably recognise from GCSE, that's the set of rules that govern the structure and creation of language. And you probably, if your first language is English, you probably apply these rules without even thinking about it. You know, a apple or an apple. You don't have to think, oh, should I use a or an? You just know. Pragmatics, the way in which language is used socially, informed by the context, and it's the meaning that cannot be found at surface level. Phonetics and phonology, which is the study of the sounds of speech. Prosodic features, the features that appear when we put speech together, are pitch, tone, intonation, volume, pace. Graphology, the visual aspect of a text, the design and choices of style. And we've got discourse, whether a text is written or spoken communication. Register, the way you speak depending on your audience, purpose or social situation. Idiolect, which is an individual's way of speaking that is unique to them, so their vocabulary, their grammar, their pronunciation. Dialect, a form of language that people speak depending on social or geographical influence. And socialect, slightly cut off on the screen there, but the way in which a particular social group speaks, so ethnic groups or teenagers, that kind of thing. We're going to go through these in a lot more detail, so don't panic, but you can see this is a subject where there's a lot to learn in terms of terminology. And if you did a spoken language study at GCSE, that'll help prepare you towards this. But it really is one of those subjects where you're learning so much new information. I think the difference between English language and English literature at A-level is that English literature naturally leads on from the GCSE of English literature, but English language, for the most part, is very much a different subject. What about coherent written expression then? Well, accurate written communication and expression, of course, is really important. There's an expectation that you spell words accurately and that you particularly know how to spell the key terminology, that you punctuate appropriately, that you can understand the rules of language in order to write clearly, and you might have thought of that at GCSE as SPAG, spelling, punctuation and grammar. Now, something that's interesting here, though, is how do I know that I'm using the correct method? And this is something that I think a lot of students will struggle with early in the course. So you've got to pay close attention to the context of the text and ensure that you fully analyse the genre, the audience and the purpose. A good starting point for any linguist is to have a basic generic list of ingredients for the most commonly appearing gaps, genre, audience, purposes and contexts. So an easy example for you to remember is that you would not usually expect to explore and analyse the graphological features of a chapter of a novel, because there's not likely to be anything interesting or relevant to comment on. Now, how do I use this terminology in a sentence? Well, do you remember P paragraphs from GCSE? The idea of point, evidence, explain. Well, this method is still very useful, as you'll need to structure your answer in a clear and logical way. The examiners like you to signpost, which would be the P in the P paragraph, the point. There are two recommended ways of signposting, and if we look at the term Lexus as an example, one way to structure your paragraph is to say, lexically, the writer has chosen to use, and then the quote, to, and then explain. Or you could say, in terms of Lexis, quote is used to explain. That sort of thing. It doesn't really matter, but you're using a very sort of simple P paragraph structure. All the way through the ebook, this idea of how do I get the grade is focused on, because it's not enough to just learn the main terminology in the guidance grid that we've just looked at. You've got to demonstrate an accurate and perceptive knowledge of the key terms within the main terminology, and this will take your answer from the broad to the specific, the expected to the impressive, the plain and boring to the wow factor. So we're going to have a little look at each term, again more detail in the ebook. Lexus and Semantics. No, Lexus is not the luxury car. There's always somebody who makes that joke. It's actually translated from the ancient Greek origin of the word, which means the vocabulary of a language. In other words, Lexis is a posh word for word. Now, lexicon is the collection of lexemes, several words, that forms a person's vocabulary. Semantics is the study of meaning. The best students will analyse the subtlety of meaning in words, phrases, sentences and whole texts, and how writers influence and manipulate a reader and their thoughts and actions. Now, writers will carefully consider semantics in order to suit a specific audience purpose, genre or context for maximum effect. So let's give you an example of what you might write in the exam. It might be something like this. Elevated Lexis, such as irrevocably and endeavours, connote sophistication and elegance, which gratifies the reader. Furthermore, colloquialisms and taboo language, scumbags, create a sarcastic tone linking to the primary purpose to entertain and humour. That's the kind of way that you're going to, put your ideas for Lexis and Semantics into an answer. The next one I want to have a look at is Semantic Field. Now, do you ever read a text and the words seem to have been borrowed from somewhere else, or the words hint at another meaning? Now, this is because the text will have a semantic field, which is the relationship that exists between some of the words or phrases used in a text. Let's use colours as an example. Red, blue, yellow, black are all colours, but can also be a semantic field of emotions: angry, upset, happy, depressed. And a writer will deliberately use words to create a semantic field, often to subtly hint at something. Lots of key terms. I'm not going to talk through all of them. Some of them you'll recognise from GCSE. Many of them you'll have to learn. And you can pause the video if you want to have a detailed look at these. What would you write in the exam? Well, you would write something like this. The text contains a semantic field of love, with lexical choices such as flowers, heart and passion used throughout. But there is also a semantic field of war and conflict running through the piece, with choices such as fight, hate and conquer to reflect the instability of the relationship between the two characters. So one more for this video, and then I'll continue the rest in the next video. So do make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And also give the video a thumbs up to show me how many of you want these language videos. So the next one is grammar. Now I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail here because I've got a playlist on grammar, and of course there is Mr. Bruff's Guide to Grammar, also available at mrbruff.com and on Amazon. But you need to know about word classes, syntax, morphology, the grammar of speech and writing, sentence forms, sentence functions, this kind of thing. And this is really, you know, have you ever cringed at a misplaced apostrophe? Have you ever written to a supermarket to question the accuracy of its advertisements, or got excited when you find a typo? No, me neither. But the rules of grammar tend to be internalised from a very young age, and it's likely that most of us, when questioned, would struggle to recall how that we acquired the rules of grammar. Many linguists believe we learn the information implicitly rather than through any formal teaching, and this may justify its lack of popularity. After all, how often do we stop to analyse how we say what we say and the order that we say it in? But you do need to know about grammar. You need to know about clauses, sentence structures and phrases, word classes, all of this kind of thing. And there are, as well as the grammar guide, also in the A-level English language guide, there's detail on that with examples again of what you might write in the exam. Okay, one more. Why not? We're on a roll. Pragmatics. Now, have you ever considered why it's acceptable to directly tell somebody you know well to shut the door, yet you would feel the need to say it's cold in here to somebody you might not know as well? Well, that's pragmatics. The meaning of an utterance is often influenced by social and sometimes historical context. You can ask yourself the following question: how has the context here had an impact on or influenced the creation and or reception of the utterance or text? It's also important to consider the impact of power, gender, occupation, attitudes, values, ideologies, culture and relationships, etc. on a text and a reader. Key terms here, well, we can look at politeness, implicature, dexis, inference, irony, positive and negative face, cooperative principles. All of these things, if you're starting the course, you might look at them and think, what are these? But that's the beauty of English language. I personally did English language and English literature for my degree, and the English literature was very much the same as what I'd done at A-level, but English language, which I didn't do at A-level, was amazing. It was like a whole new world opening up before me. And don't be put off by all of these terms. Buy the ebook, work through the chapters. You'll find that you learn something really important. What would you write in the exam? Something like this: pragmatically, stereotypical ideas about gender appear to have influenced the speaker's decision to overuse politeness strategies when conversing with the opposite sex. Hope you found it useful, guys. More videos soon. Do subscribe.